Hi, I'm Jamie Miller, Registered SQF Consultant at Kellerman Consulting, and you're watching the Supplier Approval Program video series. Kellerman Consulting releases weekly training videos and important tips and strategies to help companies keep up to date with the latest food safety regulations. So far in this series, we have looked at the basics of supply chains and the differences to expect when implementing a supplier approval program in an FSIS or FDA regulated facility. In this episode, we will continue our discussion on regulatory review and focus on the Foreign Supplier Verification Program requirements for imports and what to expect where the FDA regulates and inspects those imports. The Foreign Supplier Verification Program, or FSVP, is a program requirement that was put into place as part of the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011. Enforcement began in 2015 and applies to the importation of all food not under import inspection by the USDA and FSIS, and includes food items such as, but not limited to, packaged goods, cooking oils, various types of produce, dietary supplements, and baby formula. FSVP is a fairly simple requirement, but the difficulty with it often stems from the fact that some importers sometimes have little to no knowledge of food safety even when the rule applies directly to them. Let's dive into who needs an FSVP program and who doesn't, and explain what is required for FSVP compliance. One very important thing to know is that facilities using imported food as ingredients in their final products are exempt from FSVP requirements as long as they operate under a compliant supplier approval program to normal FSMA standards as discussed in episode 3. As a result, food factories that process food do not need an FSVP program and can present their supplier approval program if they are ever questioned about FSVP. There are some situations where food factories also conduct storage and distribution out of a shared facility, and even these facilities have the option to use supplier approval program to cover all items, or they can implement an FSVP program exclusively for the storage and distribution activities. For clarification on this point, refer to the relevant rule found in 21 CFR 1.502, Part C. So what is required for a foreign supplier verification program? At its core, the verification for foreign suppliers is a modification to a supplier approval program with a few minor but key differences. In a supplier approval program for a food factory, the food safety statements or summaries of the food production practices are sufficient to maintain regulatory compliance. Much like a supplier approval program, the FSVP program must be documented to include who in the importing company is responsible for performing the action, how the documentation will be requested and stored, and for how long. To go along with the written FSVP program, you need to request several items from the foreign supplier. The primary requirement is to collect a HACCP plan from the manufacturer. By requesting HACCP information, you can collect information about assessed risks to the products and hazards that have already been controlled. For a manufacturer acting as the importer of record, this will provide the information you need to conduct your own hazard analysis and implement the proper process controls. If a HACCP plan is not available, a flowchart and hazard analysis identifying all critical control points and process preventive controls in lieu of a HACCP plan will meet the minimum requirement and can be accepted. Beyond the HACCP plan requirement, the imported food product must come with documented proof of safety, such as a certificate of analysis for each lot imported. Should this not be available, an incoming testing program is required and can be difficult or expensive to set up, so we recommend firms only import foods that they are confident come with acceptable testing documents. The other important document required for the Foreign Supplier Verification Program is proof of training for the person that wrote or administers the HACCP plan. A written statement of training and quality may be sufficient, but in the ideal situation, the foreign supplier will present a HACCP or PCQI certificate. In our next video, we will get into more detail on how to perform an assessment of the documentation provided by your suppliers for supplier approval and FSVP compliance. At a minimum, you will need to include a requirement for HACCP plans, or at least flowcharts and hazard analyses, proof of training, and testing documentation. FSVP programs must be reassessed every year. When we speak about reassessment, we don't mean that you have to start over each year, but rather you must review your list of foreign suppliers and the items imported to make sure that the list is up to date and assess any updates that need to be made. Where changes have occurred to the products purchased or the supplier's production process, you may need to perform a new FSVP assessment. Where things are the same, you can re-sign the checklists from the current year after getting confirmation from the supplier of the ingredient that nothing in the documents originally provided for supplier assessment has changed. Please do not rely solely on this information contained in this video series when creating your food safety program. It's important to ensure your food safety program meets all of the specific regulatory requirements associated with the product you are manufacturing. Thank you for watching. In our next episode of the Supplier Approval video series, we'll discuss how to conduct document assessments and reassessments for the programs once in place. To learn more, visit our website and you'll find a full library of food safety training videos and resources. You may also follow us on LinkedIn and click the bell to be notified of new resources as they are released each week.